Well, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, from wherever you are joining us from. Welcome to our monthly webinars here at HiveMQ. So this month we've got a very interesting session for you. We're going to be talking about how to, get quick wins with your unified namespace deployment. So what we're going to do basically is to try and give you a playbook on how to sort of like, start getting value from your unified namespace within the first 12 weeks whilst at the same time, really building for scale and for AI readiness. So I'm joined by Mark O'Donovan, who's going to be unpacking all of those insights for us. And he's also prepared a very nice demo for us to show you what that would look like, once you get to that, 12-week period. So do stick around to see the demo. So just to, give you some quick housekeeping information here. So this webinar will be recorded and made available to you to watch on demand. And if you've got any questions, please do post them on the Q&A. Don't post them in the chat. Use the Q&A section, and then we'll get to those questions. We may answer some of the questions during the session if they are related to what we're showing. But if not, we're going to get to all of your questions in the last section of this webinar. So without further ado, I'd like to turn over to Mark to introduce himself and also, do the webinar for us. Mark?
Thanks very much, Kudzai, and thank you for inviting me. Um, so to tell, I suppose, people who don't know me a little bit about myself and my company, I started a company 2 years ago, Carlisle Engineering Solutions, because I wanted to build on the experience that I'd had as an engineer working in the OT and IoT domains and digital transformation. And I wanted to really, I suppose, help people, companies, engineers get started on the right foot in that journey, because what happens so often is projects start, they make bad decisions at the start that are very hard to get out of. So today I work with companies starting off. I do a lot of digital transformation maturity assessments where we'll see where a company is now, plan out what sort of architecture they're going to need, what sort of software they're going to need to choose to realize their digital strategy, and then work with them to build a proof of concept. And so I've really started to focus on those first 12 weeks as a very intense sprint to bring together some of the most important, to bring together those important steps so that you're getting wins initially, but also you're not racking up technical debt. And there's a little bit of a balancing, but you don't want to have too much technical debt, but you also don't want to spend so long preparing you don't get anything done. So there's a few slides I think we can go through here. And then the demo that I've done, I suppose I wanted to show what was possible in a very short period. So I spent 8 hours building together a rough demo. It's not really, I suppose, a proof of concept. I would hope if you're working with an integrator in 12 weeks, you'd be a little more polished than that. But it is the type of thing that an engineer could do in a plant, maybe over 2 or 3 weeks, and actually start to add value and insight to for end users. So let's go through the demo. Sorry, let's go through the presentation first, and then we can talk about the demo. So, so the first point I always like to make when I'm talking about these is, because engineers, and a lot of the audience here I think will be engineers and technical people, we look at a world of problems and we want to solve problems. And then we go to solve a problem and we meet with financial stakeholder says, well, what's the return on investment? And the return on investment is important. But also, when we're talking about digital transformation, it's more important. We have to change the way we're doing business, because the way we're changing, with the way that people are doing business is changing. So the analogy I use is 20, 30 years ago, every big company had someone working in a mailroom, a number of people working in a mailroom. They printed out letters, they sent them. the value of email isn't that you save all of those things, it's that now you operate instantly. So the value of digital transformation far outweighs any return on investment that you can sit down and will calculate. But there is also that return on investment there, and that will have to be done, I'm sure, in most organizations. So what's the approach that I suppose that I would always suggest? And it's this: you want to start small, start agile, and get wins initially. I've worked on projects where the project duration was 2-3 years, and it was at this 18 months to 2 years, you started to see returns after spending 1-2 million on licenses, 2-3 million on engineering. Whereas with a small pilot approach that costs 50,000 or 20,000, you can see wins within 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks, and you're starting to save, you're starting to see that return on investment, and you can use that new revenue or savings to fund the next stage of your digital transformation. So the steps I always say, and you'll hear me say this again and again: define your digital strategy. What is it that you want to digitally transform for? Is it to ensure quality? Is it to look at performance? Is it to develop new products? That becomes your guiding light, your North Star, as I like to call it, that when you're trying to make decisions, this can help you make those by providing that option. Invent your business. If you want to know where you're going, you have to know where you are. And you have to sit down and you have to look at your processes and you have to look at your technology. What data sources are connected? Is that data being collected today? Is that data being put in a form other systems can use today? Are other people using it today? So a lot of PLCs in a manufacturing plant are networked, but nobody is using any data from it. Define your minimum technical requirements. This is a step to make sure that as you move forward, you have a common frame that everybody is building into the same system, and that system can scale. That if you're doing this, I think as a plant engineer in your own end user company, get started, get some experience, and then write these. If you're working through a digital maturity assessment, this should be part of it by whoever is doing that for you. And then you want to carry out a proof of concept. Find a problem, find an opportunity to improve something that is really causing an irritation, and do a sprint 12 weeks, and you can have that cleared out. And we'll look a little bit at that in the demo too. So we talk about a unified namespace as the single source of truth, and I think a lot of people will confuse an MQTT broker or any broker and the unified namespace. And to make it into a unified namespace, especially one that can scale to an enterprise level, these are the things that you need to be thinking about. The structure, the hierarchy, very much ISA 95 inspired, typically, but you match your business. Where do people in your organization expect to find the data? Normalized payloads. This is one that I think when you build your first 1 or 2 systems, you'll very quickly say, we need to have common field names and structures, across our devices as we pull that in. Semantic consistency. Things need to be the same. That might be making sure that all the temperatures are in the same, either Fahrenheit or Celsius. It might be making sure that machines are called the same thing across the organization. I think we've all worked places where, different parts of the plant have different names for different areas. Maybe it's plant room 7, maybe it's the new plant room to other people. So there's lots of different structures and different tightening up of naming that you need to do as you build this. Publisher discipline, again, as you scale, if you have 500, 600 devices, you'll start to have to think about these things. But I mean, you don't need that in the first 12 weeks because you may only have a few publishers and you're unlikely to there. But I'll show you some in my example later, just some of the issues around that perhaps. Change management, obviously, and data ownership and stewardship. You're going to create a lot of data. You're going to create a lot of information, and someone has to own it. And I've seen places where you end up with, it might be a broker, it might be a historian, some other, or data repository, and nobody owns it, so nobody minds it. And things go. So this is, I suppose, my pitch that I bring people a 12-week sprint to start getting value. And one of the questions people often, or the accusations perhaps, that's too tight, that can't be done. And yeah, it's as tight as it can be. Lots of things can derail it, be it decisions being made, be it waiting for parts, but it is possible. And it's certainly possible to aim for it and try to do 12 weeks and take 14, rather than saying, well, we can't do it, so we better do a 20-month project. So the first step, assemble your team. Many places that'll be already done, if not officially in a de facto basis. Align on the vision and strategy. Why are people doing digital transformation? Inventory the business. Set your technical requirements. We spoke about those. Prep for the proof of concept. Getting ready, to carry it out. And then the proof of concept stage. Connect systems and collect the data. So get into where you're getting the data from. That can be easy sometimes. That can be very difficult sometimes. And the proof of concept should be chosen to find one, a data source you're going to be able to get the data from. You can spend 6 weeks trying to connect to some systems if you have governance issues, if you have to get permissions, if you have to get vendors involved to build new systems. So choosing your proof of concept can be important. Store the data, as you said, in a good structure. And then you start to develop your dashboards, and then you start to test and refine and deploy it. So to get a bit more practical, I suppose this is typically where I start, and it's where I started with my demo. This is the stack I use to start off small projects. There's lots of very good software out there to start to build an IoT platform on. Ignition is always chosen. Like Tatsoft. I think Aviva have a lot of good products. I chose this because it's a proof of concept often. We're trying to get it in under the radar. The funding mightn't be available yet. So, this is where I start. So I use Portainer to manage containers. We could sit down and have a big discussion on containers, but let you don't need to do this. You can install them. HiveMQ, Broker, Node-RED. Timescale is what I use for my data store. If I need a database, and then Grafana for doing more advanced visualization. And then I've started using Timebase as a historian in a lot of these. Sometimes this would be deployed on a small edge device. Sometimes it's installed in a server, and the installation would match the system. So I'm trying here to build that unified namespace so that all the systems can speak the same language, essentially, that all of the data is coming into a single place. The MQTT and Node-RED, I think that provides a great starting backbone, even without without Timescale and Grafana. And then Node-RED and Grafana being used for that visualization. You've probably heard about the minimum technical requirements, and within the unified namespace, there are minimum technical requirements that are listed off 1 to 4. I like to reword them a little bit differently. I think it's more useful. The first thing, and the most important, is you want open and accessible data. You want any system that wants, or person who wants to get data can get it. So all systems should expose data. MQTT ideally, but REST AI, if it's not, if you've got an IT system, you want a REST AI points, and you check and pull out the data. OpenSea UA works very well at the OT level. Even if it's a machine builder who builds a Modbus register that this is where the data is and we can pull it across, that can be worked with. I'm sure a lot of people here listening will have worked with machine builders or come to site with machines where you cannot access any data. I would always say if you're building a new machine, and this could be the best bit of advice that you get in this whole thing. If you're ordering a new machine, you should have a clause in there that any information that is visible to an operator is available by a digital system. That means that if you have if you have a HMI that shows you the piece count, you can read that. If you have an operator presses a button, you can know that operator because that your remote monitoring system should know everything the operator knows. And it's a simple line that really solves you a lot of problems in the future. Edge-driven architecture. I suppose as your typical OT, we're pulling data from the edge into the center. We're trying to move that so that the edge is pushing the data in. And that's just because of the numbers of devices that we're starting to connect, the amount of information. It becomes very hard to manage it the other way around. Single source of truth. I suppose where I came across MQTT and the unified namespace was I was looking for ways to stop point-to-point connections. I saw them as point-to-point connections as the sand that gets in gears of projects and slowly grinds them down and slows it down. And you don't realize it until it's too late that you now have a system that's really, really hard to change. And then the semantic hierarchy. Data has to be structured in a way where you can, understand where it is. This is just, I suppose, a DTMA. Some of the outputs that I would expect. This is actually a specification that I wrote. It's, as you saw, that you can see there, the operator action should be sent to an MQTT broker. That's exactly what I was talking about a minute ago. But as part of your digital report outputs, you should start to have a specification that's written down that it's not to stop and to limit what people can do, but it's to say, this is the minimum that we want to achieve. This is our starting point, and you can get people on the same page. So where do projects go wrong? And could I think really around here you can come in, and I think we this presentation that I did in Munich was based on my frustration of seeing LinkedIn posts that was sort of connect your unified namespace to AI and you have a digital company. And it was kind of, there's a lot of steps in between. It's often not that simple. And when you go to use data, even if it's in an MQTT broker, even if it's supposed to be organized in a unified namespace, you can still have a lot of problems. If there hasn't been lack of governance, people haven't, it started off done well, but now you have duplicate systems writing into the same topic. You have different naming for similar things. You don't have a standard kind of motor block anymore. All the motors are a little bit different. These things, and that, I suppose that's tying into that lack of governance can lead to the poor semantic structure, the inconsistent payload. So, as I said, do you say temperature is equal to 22.5? And I would say, well, 22.5 what? Is it Celsius? Is it Fahrenheit? And AI often I find doesn't ask these questions. It will assume and it will run and it will go at uncontrolled processing, and then no historical backfill. I think a lot of it, that's something that people that we who talking about the unified namespace sometimes forget. You need history. Historians are very important.
Yeah.
After the broker, I think it's the number 2 thing you need to think about. How do we store the data?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe before you kind of like go on there, just to emphasize on this specific section here. So totally agreed there. This is where a lot of UNS projects fall apart, right? Because it's easy enough to really just connect things up because you've got this edge-driven approach. Very soon, it's uncommon to start to have like what you call like a wild west where everything is being dynamically discovered or dynamically published, right? So you don't know what's going through your broker. You've got no way really of enforcing that. So obviously you can't really build a trustable AI system on top of that data. So you want to be able to have some governance mechanisms where you are monitoring what traffic is, going through the broker. And then if it's not governed, you want to be able to bring it into sort of like the governed lane where you're able to
Yeah.
enforce, you through things like schema validation primarily to say this is the data contract of sort of like publishing information about an asset is you need to conform to it. And then that way you've got sort of like a trusted source. Your unified namespace goes from being just a sort of like a soup of everything just mixed up to something that can really be trusted to make decisions because you've got this, layer where you're really, following some governed structures. So yeah, just quickly,
And this might seem, I'm sure people might will not trust maybe this question isn't there, but this is a genuine question from me. Is that something that I think Hive Pulse is going to help me with, or am I reading Hive Pulse and what it's supposed to do wrong? Or is it really kind of is it is part of what it does trying to help tame that Wild West for people?
Yeah. So I mean, naturally, really for HiveMQ or for the unified namespace, this is the next step, right? So obviously with Pulse can really disclose the many different features that are going to
Okay.
come up,
Sure.
GA. But fundamentally speaking, as we have already, put information out there regarding the private preview and all of the information, this is, precisely what we really we're going to be,
Yeah.
sort of like solving that governance aspect of the unified namespace.
Because when we were in Munich, and this was in conversations with you and me, but there was a lot of people from different companies there, and a lot of the conversation was about governance. Now, I think we were in Germany, so there was concerns about governance and schema in particular. Not to cast all of Germany with the same brush, but I think certainly compared to earlier talking with perhaps American companies, but even talking with people in America, I think governance is one of the topics that's really, governance, MCP are the two things that I keep hearing people talk about in relation to unified namespace at the moment. Uh,
Yeah.
so, and then I suppose because we were talking about unified namespace for AI, if you have a unified namespace and you're looking at AI projects and you have the data, what are the type of things that could help you? And what are the type of things you could have built maybe a year earlier and started to build out? And obviously a historian and time series database is so fundamental, maybe it shouldn't be up here, but sometimes that's important. Having graph-based context models, things that can represent assets and hierarchies and relationships and dependencies that really will help, fill out the picture. Metadata registry, something that will register and track metadata um, for you, your models, that you've written them down and documented them. That that's a helpful thing. That sounds simple, but sometimes the model's all in someone's head. One person's built all this, and then pipelines, feedback loops, and those sort of things. So I think, oh, and yeah, this is the last slide. I think I moved to the end. This was why I started the company, and it was what I saw. Big consultancies would go in and talk with big companies, and they would, do, they would recommend the software platforms they knew, and the software platforms they knew wanted to have closed data. They wanted to tie you in to a monolithic software-based structure, and then they would use big system integrators. And because they were using, those big organizations, because of reliability and, governance and all of these other things, they ended up with a need to have $1 million projects. If you're a big system integrator, you need big projects to feed it. You need to be able to do these things. Um, and if you make those wrong decisions at the start, you can't go back. The project gets too much momentum. I've been in projects where 6 months in, and I think everybody knew we needed to adjust, but trying to get the buy-in to adjust was just very, very difficult, because nobody wanted to go back and take a step back because it had been so hard to get to that point we were at. Whereas an agile approach, the approach that I spoke about, where you do a 12-week sprint and then you say, right, what's next? We do a 12-week sprint. And that sprint might be take the function we just built and roll it out to 10 machines. And that's how you scale within a sprint where you take the functions you created on one machine and roll them out and adapt them to other machines. And once you start that, it seems a slow start, but 6 months in, you're flying. Okay. Do you want to do some questions now? Kudzai, do you want to jump into the demo
Yeah, so
and do them all
I
at
think
the end?
maybe I think we could actually take one question here. I think it's more relevant to the discussion as we go into the demo. So we've got Mashak. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. They're asking that if could you please touch on the performance limitations of the UNS applications? Can it be used in scenarios where OT layer generates hundreds of thousands of tags with sub-second frequency, and that data needs to be broken out into other L2 and higher level systems. So have you had any experience with performance limitations, or what's your view on what are the
I've never hit limitations, using MQTT in a limitation. Um, it's normally a limitation of the computer you're running on. Um, you can certainly do things that, if you retain every topic, you can slow down the performance of your broker. The example I would always give is in Dallas, in Prove It, there was it millions of messages going in every minute? Um, I know I have a video that I put up on LinkedIn when I did my review, and to me, that was the star of the show. The MQTT Explorer that was running and that was updating and had 45 million messages in it. When I took a video in the morning. I mean, MQTT. There's certainly MQTT brokers out there with hundreds of thousands of devices connected.
yeah
Um, so um, yes, there are. I mean, I wouldn't try and build an infrastructure with hundreds of thousands of data points out of Node-RED. Um, so choosing the software for the system, but I don't see any problem. I don't see MQTT and Unified Namespace hitting a limit that way. Y- you know, I don't think so. But
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Mashek has got a follow-up question, which I'm more than happy to answer. They're asking if there are any benchmarks published. So yes, we actually did a benchmark at HiveMQ where we actually had 100 million, I think it's 150, but certainly 100 and above million concurrent connections. We'll be more than happy to send you a link to that white paper where you can see all of that information. So yeah, we'll get to the rest of the questions at the end of this session. For now, we just want to quickly jump into a demo so that we could see what that, quick UNS win
yeah.
looks like.
So for my demo, what I did, I need to try and start it again. I spent about 8 hours working on this, and 3 or 4 of those was building a simulator that would simulate data from 10 machines, and put them in a Modbus register. It's a simple it is a simple Python script running on a original generation Raspberry Pi. So it stops every now and then. But this is the Modbus register that, as you can see it. Um, you have machine one in the first row, machine two in the second row, and the count coming from each one. I also have some other information of status and speed, but that's, I suppose, for what we're doing at the moment, less important. And let me just try starting it up again. Okay, doke. There, we're connected back with live data. As you can see, some of the machines are coming in and some of them aren't. So I then went to Node-RED, and with a lot of assistance, or certain assistance from ChatGPT, built two Node-RED flows, one Node-RED flow, but two little parts, where the first step was to very simply read in the Modbus data, so connect in for machine one, connect into mod the Modbus data that I wanted. I think anyone familiar with Modbus will manage that. Write a small script that would basically read that payload and publish it into my MQTT broker. in the raw data. So you can see here, if we take machine 1, the raw data is being published, and it's just my values from Modbus, the registers that come in. And I think it's always good to, when you read in your raw data from a source, publish it straight into your broker before you contextualize it, and then you can work on it later. I also do a contextualization piece here. Now, in this example, I'm only reading the count. So all this block does really is publishes in a count. And then every minute, or every 3 minutes now, as I've slowed it down a little bit, I calculate the status and speed. So if the number hasn't gone up in the last since the last time the script ran, then the machine stopped. If the count has gone up, then the machine. And what I wanted to do was kind of show, this is what the output is. It is a simple single point dashboard for maybe an area supervisor, a plant supervisor, that gives them insights into their plant, and its current status and how it has been going for the last while. So machine 1 stopped, machine 2 is running, machine 3 is down, which is the string I use for breakdown. So something's happened there that's actually broken down. Sorry. So just to come back, that was machine 1. Machine 2 and machine 3, I'm getting a status integer, so I can see whether it was stopped or it's in error. Sometimes you're lucky to be able to do that. Sometimes all you have is that count. I've also, as part of the script, put in the times for break, so that if we happen to be running this and it was lunchtime, you'd see that while the speed was stopped, it wouldn't say stopped, it would say break. And then, I haven't finished it out, but here's, machine 4, machine 5, 6, 7, 8. We can put it in, we can put a graph in. So, that was, as I said to you earlier, because my plan was to do it this way, and then my plan was to use Hive Edge to pull the data in from Modbus over to Adapter and use the UNS functionality to publish it in. And it was very sunny in Ireland over the weekend, which is a rare occurrence even in the summer. So we went to the beach instead, and enjoyed ourselves. So, but that's another way of doing it. As I said earlier, there's lots of ways to do this. I don't think there's a software. It's about using the right software at the right time to solve the right problem. And I think some people would be scared to start a Node-RED because they might say, well, in 6 months, I might need to look at another system. And my point is, well, get to 6 months. If you get to a point where you've built so much that you need to now go to another system, that's a sign of success. It's better than being stuck and spending 6 months not developing anything and not giving value. And of course, once we have that data, it would be another small amount of work to start to give a performance percentage, because we know the max speed of a machine, to start to log into a database the time that the system was stopped and the time the system was running, and calculate a availability percentage for the day, and those sort of things. Once you start building and you start giving people insights into data, they will have more questions and they will want more data and they will want it in a different format. So I think, the reason I did that, the reason I made this demo was just to, I suppose, show how easy it is to get started. The one thing that I did that I said, I tried to think, put my head back to when I started using MQTT and how would I have built a unified namespace. And the one thing that I think, if I was doing this 2 years ago, my count today would just have been a number. My status would just be the timestamp. So I think that's about the only thing that I wouldn't have been able to build 2 years ago when I was starting this journey. And if someone was in that position, I think, and they had machines that they could communicate with, and they have Node-RED, and they have ChatGPT, something like that, and probably a lot better and a lot better looking, is very achievable in 1 to 2 weeks. So I suppose, are there questions coming in about that? I don't, or we can dig around, or if you want to show anything else, or ask any questions.
Yeah, I think there's lots of questions here. So start here with Mark. Mark Patout is actually asking if do you use Sparkplug in your applications or do you prefer the UNS to contain plain human readable JSON?
I prefer plain readable JSON. I'm laughing because I've spoken with you, Kudzai, on this before. I think 2 years ago there was a much more push for Sparkplug. I think if you have edge devices that will communicate over Sparkplug, that is really, really good. Um, if you are using Ignition, certainly Sparkplug is very useful there. But I prefer plain readable human readable JSON. Um, but I do often structure my payloads in a very Sparkplug-like structure. It doesn't follow it's the topic convention that I don't like. Just you know, trying to fit it in. Um, yeah, it just seemed a bit overly cumbersome for me. And especially when you're looking at doing things like if you want to publish a schedule of work orders, and you might have 300 work orders in it. Or I did one of my early projects, I was building a system that would take the weather forecast and pass it through a wind turbine model across a wind farm and calculate the total power output of the wind farm. And that weather forecast had, I think it was for 48 hours, and each hour had 28 different data points in it. So doing that in Sparkplug, I kind of looked and went, I don't know where to start here. So I kind of went with the human readable JSON, and I've stuck with it since. I think there's a place
Yeah.
for Sparkplug, but it's more the niche, which is a change from perhaps 2 years ago thinking.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think we've got some more questions here. We've got Mohammed was asking how does UNS connect or handle transactional data from SAP, for example, and also other enterprise applications which are not coming from the OT environment?
So I suppose I'll answer this in the practical sense where I've had to do this, and where I'm doing a transaction with a broker is how I would typically, no, sorry, a transaction with the the ERP or other IT system, that the the data can be published to the MQTT broker, but when you need to, for example, book the final results of a work order into the ERP, you leverage the ERP's booking system if it has one. That they will have a structure for doing that automatically, and that you'll have a gateway in. I don't think a unified namespace, or certainly one built on MQTT, is ideal for that transactional um, sort of data. I don't think I would say, if I was building a financial system, that it would, that I said that's what I would build a unified namespace in. I would certainly have a semantic hierarchy. I have seen similar sort of transactional systems built on a AMQP, where it was passing data from a level 4 system to a multiple level 3s. Um, but I didn't dig into the design of it. I was peripherally involved, let's say. But
Yeah.
it's not. I think you pass a lot of that data through, but where it's a transaction, and you use other means to actually do the booking, and if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just kind of like emphasize on that point before you go to the next question. So you kind of like need to think about the unified namespace as this hub for exchanging events, right? So what that means is that uh, on the OT side, you may have something like Node-RED or HiveMQ Edge or Ignition that connects and talks, the language of the PLC, and then publishes all these, events, whether it's an operator action that has been recorded that gets published as an event. And then typically we have that same, or gateway on the IT side of things, right? Where you're connecting to your ERP systems whenever a new production order has been, sort of like generated.
Yeah.
That particular proxy software is listening in and then publishing that as an event into the unified namespace. So unified namespace becomes your sort of like event hub where you're exchanging all of these events in a
Yes.
way.
Yeah, I think it's about that exchanging data. I mean, the other place where I think in PLC to PLC communications, I wouldn't do that. Certainly, if it's safety PLC to PLC communications, which I do quite a bit in, that's not the right solution. MQT isn't the right solution. In the same way, I don't think it's the right solution to, your PLC to PLC communications. There's better protocols that exist for that. So, I mean, the answer is always it depends, but there's the right tool for the right job. And I don't think a unified namespace is the right tool for that transactional data, but it can feed the information up to the system that is going to use it to perform the transactional data, and then report back that the transaction has happened and the new state and the new events that are associated with around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we've got plenty of questions. I think it's a good thing that we still have got a lot more time left. I
Good.
think I think we've, made the point with the demo, but if there's something that you want to maybe to dig into some more,
Oh,
just feel free to
no,
let me know.
it was as much to kind of inspire and to show people what is possible that that's a weekend's work and not a lot of the weekend. I wasn't you know in the room 14 hours a day. As I said, it's it's quite unpolished. But it's another hour or two to start to pull that together to make it look really production ready.
Exactly. And I always say this to say if you can already see the status of your machines, I mean, a lot of people underestimate that, there's a whole lot of, companies and maybe some, in the audience here who have got no visibility whatsoever into the status of the machine.
Yeah,
They've got no visibility into what action the operator has taken, whether a mix has been started, or just getting that visibility is enough to move the
yeah,
needle for a whole lot of people. And I think this is what you have, managed to demonstrate here.
yeah.
So yeah, just to move on to the next question. So we've got a question from Ahmad, who's asking, in an environment where vertical integration already exists, how can a unified namespace add value without requiring a complete overhaul of the current systems? UNS can build on top of the existing infrastructure by providing real-time data and serving as a single source of truth. Considering this, how large would the database need to be to historize data from multiple systems? Additionally, how is redundancy handled within unified namespace to ensure high availability and reliability? So there's quite a lot of questions there in one question. So maybe if you want to pick one that
Okay.
comes to
So
your mind.
I suppose a lot of the answers to those questions depend on the software you use. So, I mean, if you're looking at redundancy and if you're looking at, so if you're building an MQT broker, you can choose Hive. There are other options. There are open source. There are license-free options you can use. But if you're building an enterprise solution and you want to have high availability clustering, you're looking at something like Hive, where you have that built into the software, and that's part of it. Um, but I'm sure you could build something using the server redundancy, using things that would provide that for you. Um, the other questions, I
Yeah,
mean, if you don't use a unified namespace and you're storing all of that data, you have the same sizing requirements. Um, with the unified namespace, it allows you very easily store all the data in one time series database, or store different pieces of it in different areas. Um, you can store some of it locally, you can store some of it in the cloud. So I think it's really a question that you have to, pick apart. And, if you take the approach that I think where you build up slowly and you start, you'll have a system that'll fit, and then you'll start to say, oh, my performance is getting low, it's a problem, or my initial specs aren't enough, we now need to improve. If you try and build a enterprise solution from the start, it's impossible to calculate.
yeah. Absolutely. And then just quickly to emphasize on the, this idea of redundancy. So I think this is really where, why companies like HiveMQ exist, right? Because as you would know, Ahmad, once you have that unified namespace as the single source of truth, it means that if it goes down, then it means your entire communications is out, right? So this is where kind of like HiveMQ really, provides not redundancy, because redundancy in this case is that you've got maybe two brokers, one sort of like takes over. But HiveMQ has got like clustering technology that allows you to spin up, multiple nodes within the cluster. So whether you want to put them in multiple geographical locations, but you've got this high availability and there's no guarantee that no single message will be lost, or that in sort of like environment or infrastructure will not collapse. So you don't have that single point of failure, as it were. So I think we also have some questions around. I think it's we've got someone. Bavik is asking. We have some of data like bill of materials, demand is available in SAP. If I would like to connect or bring that into the unified namespace, how can I do so? Is there any tools where directly SAP connectors are available?
There are. I know. Well, there SAP have tools that will allow you extract data in their what was MII has now be nothing's been random. They have a new product. Is it digital manufacturing, SAP DM perhaps? I know within Ignition you have Sepasoft, which has capabilities to connect in. Um, and then your SAP has other systems, but they're the ones that I suppose I'm aware of that I've seen being used and have been used to effect. And I've seen so I mean that's really it. It depends which way you want to go. Do you want Are you having SAP sharing the data down and taking more of that OT layer, or do you have a product that integrates in and pulls the data in to a system that then can repackage it, do a bit of contextualization and publish it into the namespace?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we do have Raimo who's asking, how do you differentiate the data from different applications in the same machine, in the same computing platform like the PLC? To me, this sounds that you would contextualize the data in the higher level systems rather than using the blunt asset structure metadata of the data. I don't know if you
So
if you get that.
I have a, I in that large project we spoke earlier, the PLCs had the data, but some machines, there was one PLC for a machine that had all the data. Some machines had four PLCs in the machine. And then there was one area where you had four machines, three PLCs, and different parts of different machines' code in the PLCs. It had built up organically. So if you took a really, device orientated view, you would publish PLC, down, and that wouldn't be to me, right? So there's work involved. There is thinking work involved to say this data we're pulling is the speed from motor one. So let's call it motor one speed. And let's have motor two, speed, motor three speed. So I think that's you know, in what we're doing for digital transformation, it's connect, collect, store. That's the collect part. And to me, when you collect that data from a source, you need to contextualize it within the organization, add that context. And I know some people asked the kind of question. That's what I call the OT gateway, which is what I was using Node-RED there for. It's often a SCADA or an IoT platform that does that. And it's there that you add in the context, So I take in the raw data, publish it, but then add the context that makes it human readable and browsable within the namespace. I think that.
Yep. So we do have a question from Jack Cunningham, who's asking a question on the architecture slide with the products. Would Node-RED be the place where you would apply translations to enforce semantics and standards before entering the broker? Assuming so, do you see any limitations with this approach at scale, and one might need to upgrade this piece down the road? I think maybe you may have touched a bit on that, no?
A little, and I haven't put in Node-RED anything that enforces the you know that enforces that my payloads are in the correct schema. And with Node-RED, it would be verily manually managed. You would have to check it. Even when I was building this, you saw the if I show I had to go in, and when I was troubleshooting my demo, I would have copied over machine one, and in the code here where I write down the topic, and I did this very manually. You may not be able I had to change machine one to machine two. And sometimes people forget that. I'm sure I did in my little demo, and you're now publishing the same. So that's when you start to look at higher level platforms that have that orchestration and modeling. I use FlowFuse a lot with Node-RED. That helps do that, where you build subflows, where you have one flow that does one subflow, an object oriented approach where that does all of your semantic hierarchy. So you can, Node-RED doesn't have great capabilities natively, so the responsibility goes on the person building it. There are other solutions that would help you do that.
Yeah.
And if I had built it out with the Hive Edge solution, it would have been more naturally enforced, because it would have
Yeah,
organized the payloads and things for me. So there are
yeah,
tools
for
to
sure.
help you. Node-RED probably isn't the best one, but that's where you have to add the context. To me, when you pull in raw data, that's where you have to add the context. The better approach would be that the edge device would have the context and send you the payload, but we don't live in that world often.
Yeah, absolutely. And just also, quickly emphasize on that. So, I don't know if you're familiar, Jack, with the HiveMQ Data Hub. So basically, it's this, schema validation engine that you deploy. It could run on the broker. It can also run on platforms such as HiveMQ Edge, whereby this is where you do your enforcing of the, schema right at the source of the data. So once you've done the mapping of all your, data from all your PLCs and tags, you've got this object or this, payload that you expect. You can then start to enforce that, schema at the edge before it even hits your broker. But if you want to also do that enforcement, at a more sort of like a broker level, you could also do the same because the principle is the same. But to your point, it's important to do sort of like that enforcement at the edge before it really, hits the downstream applications. All right, so we do have another question from Daniel, who's asking, is it a standard practice to use network or MAC addresses to dynamically assign unified namespace locations to machines that do not have static locations within a plant?
Um, I haven't done that, but that's a good idea. I can see, a use case for that. Um, I could certainly, typically, I haven't done it, but I'm sure people have, because it does sound like a good idea. I might be taking that one, Daniel, and using it at some point.
Cool. So we've got another question from Mikolai, who's asking, what about exchanging work order data between MES and PLCs? Should it be made via unified namespace, like MES publish current work order and device pick it up, e.g. via Sparkplug, or for example, print work order number on each part? Is this a suitable use case for the unified namespace?
Yes, and I suppose I'll explain how I've done that previously. I think that's sometimes an easier way. So in the case, work order was pulled would have been pulled from the ERP to the MES. It was just a SQL query to pull it. That would have given a work order that would have been published into the unified namespace. However, the MES then, when it assigned the machine, you know, it would often it would write the data down to a SCADA, and then the SCADA would be the final step to the PLC. Or you have some other connector where you will probably need something to subscribe to that topic in the broker and publish it down to the correct um, uh, registers in your PLC. I I wouldn't try to do that with any of the PLCs that I have used that with native natively from MQTT straight. No, I would ones that have a Linux machine associated with them that pulls it down and translates across. That's different. But I haven't used the new Rockwell one. I've used the Siemens, and I would not. The Siemens one needs some more work. Basically, I'll put it that way. That's the nicest way. It'll get there, but it's just yeah. So that's normally what you do to a SCADA or platform that will write down to the registers using the PLC native communications.
Good stuff. So there's another question from Sujit. I think he's asking more about this deck that you showed us here. Is there a way to set up this complete POC using demo version of all software sample code used in this setup?
Well, everything is that I used is open source. If I share it, so I use Portainer to deploy my stack, everything in containers. Node-RED is open source. I use the Hive Edge, and I used that's actually all I used. I had Grafana and then Flux, which I'll use. I don't have the code publicly available. It's something I'll have to get better at and put on. So I'll try. If you want, I can send you the Python script I'm using to publish, or the Node-RED. Reach out to me and I can share that. There's no problem. I think that answers that.
Yep. Yeah, I think we've got some time, maybe for two more questions or so. We've got Petros who's asking, I missed where exactly in your architecture is the ISA 95 context added?
That is in this example, it was in Node-RED. It's what I would call I would add it always in what I call my OT gateway. That is often a SCADA. Most of the SCADAs can publish MQTT now, and they can also are very good at talking to PLCs. So for a PLC-based example, I would read the data in, and use that to drive the context, and publish in.
Okay, and then maybe, yeah, we still have some time for a question. We've got one from Mark Pitout who's asking, how do you contend with situations where a ICT cybersecurity officer blocks network access to OT assets from their enterprise networks because in court it is a cyber risk? That is, can you talk about the value of
Yeah.
how the edge-driven approach of MQTT allows you to connect outbound from the OT domain and
Yeah.
you don't need open ports?
So I think in a general case, where you want to do something and you have that pushback on cyber risk, it's often about person talking to them, understanding the concerns, and figuring out how to build it in a that constructive engagement point of view. MQTT does help. I've had those conversations with those things, where the concerns being raised that now, we're communicating from the edge with a single outbound connection, to transmit data on both ways. That took me a long time as an OT engineer to figure out that a single outbound connection can have data traveling up and down it. And that makes it much harder. It's a much more secure design pattern, as the cybersecurity folks would say. And it protects the information, or the data at the edge. So that's certainly, if you're getting pushback on MQTT, it is more secure than where you have the central polling response where you need an inbound connection to your plant edge. So I think it's a case of trying to get your cybersecurity team to tell you how to solve the problem in a secure way rather than you having to figure it out. Because I think that's what happens a lot of OT engineers. They come up with a plan, they get told that's not secure, but they're not the cybersecurity experts. They don't know how to make it secure. And I've worked with some teams that have been fabulous at that, who the cyber people will engage and they will figure it out and they will say, you can't do it that way, but you can do it this way, and you make it work.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been such a fantastic, conversation that we've had with you here today, Mark. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. And for those of you who have not answered questions, please feel free to reach out to us directly, or you could reach out to Mark also directly with your questions. Thank you again for taking the time to join us today. Until next time, this brings us to the end of this webinar.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks, Kudzai.
Thank you.